Hello everybody, this is John Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-minute histories videos. And today we're going to talk about Laurel Cemetery here on Bel Air Road across from Clifton Park. And if you're looking at your screen squinting and saying, John, that's great that we're going to talk about the cemetery, but I don't see a cemetery. I see a patch of grass and a parking lot. Well, that's because in the 1950s, the cemetery was paved over and became a shopping center. But we're going to get to that chapter in a second. I'm going to be briefer than usual because I'm pleased to be joined today by Dr. Elgin Klugh, who chairs the Laurel Cemetery Memorial Task Force, and he's going to tell us what his group has done in his planning. But before I turn it over to Dr. Klugh, let me just say a few words about the cemetery and two of the people buried here. The cemetery was founded in 1852. It was Baltimore's first non-denominational African-American cemetery. And the site that they chose, Bel Air Road, or Bel Air Avenue, I believe back then, had already been a cemetery for free and enslaved servants of local landowners. In 1852, when the cemetery incorporated, it greatly expanded. And over the years, over 100 years that it operated, 5,000, maybe upwards of 10,000 people were interred here, including over 200 African-American soldiers who fought for the Union in the Civil War. But let me talk about two people really quickly before turning it over. The first is Daniel Payne. Daniel Payne was born in 1811 in Charleston, South Carolina, to free African-American parents. He was, at a young age, was a shoemaker and a carpenter, but also had a tutor and got a pretty good education that took him far. At the ripe old age of 19, he started a school for African Americans, but that ran afoul of the laws that prohibited educating black people back then, and it had to close. But he never gave up that dream. He became a minister, came up here to Baltimore, and was a longtime minister at Bethel AME Church, now on Druid Hill Avenue in West Baltimore. Became the 6th bishop of the AME Church, so rose to not just local but national prominence. And then in the 1850s, 1852 I believe, went on to Ohio and founded Wilberforce University, the nation's first HBCU, historically black college and university. And he was the founder and president. That made him the first black college president in the country. Wilberforce College is now Wilberforce University and is still going strong. He died in, let me make sure I get the date right, 1893, and was buried here. A year later, folks rallied to erect a memorial for him, and none other than our own Frederick Douglass was one of the speakers, again showing his national prominence. Second person I'd like to talk about is Alexander Wayman. Wayman was born in 1821, so 10 years younger than Payne, and he was born here in Maryland, in Caroline County. If you know Wayman's Landing, I believe in Caroline County, it's still there. That's the same Wayman. That was his family farm. Wayman was also a minister. He rose to become the 7th bishop in the AME Church, and he was a church builder. In the years before the Civil War, he founded dozens, and that's right, dozens of churches in Maryland and Pennsylvania and New Jersey. In the years after the Civil War, he went on to found the conferences, the statewide conferences in Virginia and Florida and Georgia. He was sort of a one-man church organizing machine, clearly dedicated to his calling. Let me read a few quick words that a colleague of his, Levy Jenkins Coppin, another bishop, said about Wayman. He called Wayman one of the two bright lights of the era, along with Frederick Douglass, who fought for freedom and education for African Americans. Coppin said, and here I'll quote, "He was princely in appearance and may have been a lineal descendant from a royal house in Africa, for he was of unmixed blood. As a speaker, he was naturally eloquent with an easy style. He could preach 3 times a day without soiling his collar. Upon examination, his diary showed that he averaged a sermon a day, year after year." So again, clearly loved what he did. He died in 1895 and was buried here. And as an aside, I think a group called the Choptank River Heritage Organization, before COVID, was doing tours showing his legacy on the Eastern Shore. So hopefully when COVID is over, they'll start that back up again. All right, so we are here on this grassy lot that is a cemetery, but in 1958, after years of neglect, had been bought and sold, and then was not just closed, but was demolished to become a shopping center, the Bel Air Edison Crossing Shopping Center and parking lot. That is clearly the lowest point in this cemetery's history, but we are not going to end on that low point. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Klugh to talk about what his group already has done and is planning for the future to bring dignity back to this site. All right, Dr. Klugh, we are all yours.
Hi, my name is Elgin Klugh, and I'm a professor at Coppin State University in the areas of social science and anthropology. I first became involved with the Laurel Cemetery Project at the invitation of Dr. Ronald Castanzo at the University of Baltimore. He discovered the site by looking at old maps and designed a project to engage students in archaeological research. And with students from Coppin State University, the University of Baltimore, and the Community College of Baltimore County, we came out and did indeed confirm that burials do exist at the present site. The next step was to get the word out to the community. To do this, we chose to have the Laurel Cemetery Project Symposium on the campus of Coppin State University on June 15, 2019. At the symposium, we explored the history of the cemetery. We actually interviewed members of the descendant community, and we put a call out for volunteers who would be willing to work with us to create and install a permanent memorial here at the site. From that, the Laurel Cemetery Memorial Project was born. Since our first meeting in August 2020, we have formed ourselves into a 501c3 organization, and most recently we were awarded an African American Heritage Preservation Program grant from the Maryland Historical Trust and the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. This grant will allow us to rebuild and reconstruct the retaining wall along Bel Air Avenue, to install a walkway, and to install interpretive signage along the walkway that will teach the history of the cemetery. We do plan to install an actual memorial, but we will seek additional grant funding for that project. Additionally, we continue to do research with our collaborators with the Baltimore African American Historical and Genealogical Society, the Agnes Callum chapter. With them, we are going through Baltimore City death certificates to identify reported Laurel Cemetery burials. Because the records of the cemetery appear to have disappeared during the court cases in the 1950s, there's no other way that we have to find out who was buried here. Thus far, our search has identified over 14,000 Laurel Cemetery burials. And although our research has been stymied because of COVID, once we get going again, we anticipate that we'll likely be able to find between 35,000 to 40,000 burials for Laurel Cemetery reported simply from Baltimore City death certificates. Beyond that research, we have started our project in terms of developing a book on the history of the cemetery. And once COVID subsides, we will continue our efforts to deliver public presentations of the cemetery and the exhibiting of our Laurel Cemetery timeline exhibit. So there's much more to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Klugh, and I know I'm speaking for many of us and wishing you good luck in uncovering more information about this. And we will track your progress and maybe come back with another video to learn more about the folks interred here, as well as the folks who were moved to other cemeteries. Thanks so much, and we're going to see you next time.